Hello, everybody. Anthony Crane here with Pocket Coach. And today's experiment is a very well-known one to most of you, probably sprint planning. So I'm not going to waste your time with stuff I think you probably already know. I'm going to try to give you stuff that might be new and useful. Let me go ahead and start my 5-minute timer and let's see what I can do in 5 minutes. So first off, here's the experiment. Here's the problem that sprint planning is trying to solve. Those who do not plan, they tend to fail, but those who stick to their plans also tend to fail. It's one of my favorite quotes. Long range plans are incorrect the minute the ink dries, right? So we need a way to create lightweight plans and then keep our teams on track through constant pivots, right? That's the way we do it. And that's why sprint planning happens every 2 weeks. We are proactively replanning instead of reactive. In waterfall, we only replan when things are going wrong. In agile, we replan every 2 weeks because we know the plans are wrong. And that's a much different mindset. Okay, so hypothesis, sprint planning will allow us to create these lightweight plans and adjust those plans on a cadence based on what we learn day by day, week by week, sprint by sprint. We are going to proactively replan. We're also going to improve our say-do ratios, right? To make sure that we can commit to something and actually do what we say we're going to commit to. It'll also allow us to do this with a collective mind, all the people thinking about it instead of just one project manager telling everyone what the schedule is. This is a 6-week pivot or persevere every 2-week kind of experiment. Typical outcomes. So if you do this, you should see increases in both productivity and predictability for the team. Finally, skill growth criteria. What do we got to do to run the experiment? You have allocated work to a sprint and have used some kind of an estimation technique to protect the team from overcommitting. That is what the points are for, is to protect the team. The only use for points at a team level is protection from outsiders or protection from their own goodwill. Okay. Also, you have read the Scrum Guide. It looks like I spelled article wrong there. I'll get that fixed. The Scrum Guide article on sprint planning, and you followed their agenda or the agenda in this library. They actually don't have an agenda anymore in the latest Scrum Guide. So here it is. If you haven't read the Scrum Guide, it's 13 pages. Get on it. The sprint planning you can see is like half a page, 3/4 of a page here. So by all means, read that. They don't have an agenda anymore. That's okay. I got one for you. So this is the agenda that my teams use as their shoot. Again, if you don't know what Shu Hari is, please watch our Shu Hari video. During Shu, I have them follow this particular agenda, and then they improve it as they master it. So first off, decide if we have a clear sprint goal. Now, this one's controversial. A lot of people think you have to have a sprint goal. I disagree. I've been on so many agile teams where we didn't have a goal, but we had a lot of work to do. And so we would just take all that work and kind of look at it and then say, okay, if we summarize this, that's our goal. So there's really 2 ways to have a goal. One is you just have one. Hey, this 2 weeks, we got to get this done. That's wonderful. Okay. But sometimes it's just, we have a lot of work to do that's kind of unrelated. Let's just take a look at it and then summarize it into a goal. And where the goals are useful, one is to remind ourselves at a high level what we were going for, and two, to communicate to outsiders what it is our team's going after, especially if you have lots of teams you're looking at. That can be quite useful. All right, so then I'm going to go through the rest of the agenda here. I'm probably going to run out of time, so the second 5 minutes will be to just cover the details. So let me cover the high level. We're going to allocate stories to our iteration. We're going to update initial estimates. We're going to consider our historical velocity and capacity, including vacations and stuff. We're going to validate the sprint goal. So now that we've gone through all this, was that sprint goal that we came up with up here, if we even did, is it good? If we didn't create one, then we'll create one now. And then right after sprint planning, we're going to update our acceptance criteria to get out of the new column. And if you don't know about our columns, we have another video. I think it's a daily stand-up one that we did, or visualizing flow. One of those two where we actually list out all the columns and how we use them. The new column, you're not allowed to leave it unless you have your story defined, and you got to leave it within a day of sprint planning. So this is a motivator afterwards to get done. Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't you have to do that refinement to do the sprint planning? No. And so that's what I'm going to cover in the second 5 minutes. So that's it. That's the high level agenda. So for the next minute and a half here, and then maybe 5 minutes after, I'm going to go into the details of this agenda. So if you're curious, stick around and let's get into it. Okay, so allocating stories. How do we do that? One, we work with features, and features are big things that take us a quarter or less to deliver. So some people call them epics. Those of you who use Jira Cloud might call those epics, but in SAFe, they call them features. So we happen to use the word features. So we work feature by feature, starting from the most important feature. We look at that feature and say, well, can we get this feature done? Because if we can get a feature done, that's value to the customer out the door, right? If we have more capacity, then we'll look at the next feature. Or if there's timing issues, in other words, we can get some stories in the feature done, but the rest have to wait, then we might pull some on the next feature and do that as well. So basically, we try to complete a feature before looking at the next feature, but often we can't. And so we probably have 3 features running anytime in a single sprint, maybe 1 finishing and maybe 1 starting, who knows. So work feature by feature. Also, you might have unparented stories and you want to check those as well, not just the ones tied to features. Don't forget those. Now, there's a lot of controversy around whether stories have to have features. We have another video on product definition. Read that one. Go review that video. Well, watch that video and you'll understand why we believe that many stories might be unparented. That's my first 5-minute time box. I'm going to go ahead and reset my timer. And I hope to wrap up this agenda in the next 5 minutes. Let's see. Let's hit start. Okay, so if you're sticking around, it's just because you want more details. You also can harvest stories from your backlog. You might also create new ones. You might realize, yeah, the stories we have in our backlog are just not making sense. Delete those, get rid of them. They'll come back again if they're important. Kanban teams have an event called triage where they delete like 6 months, anything older than 6 months, figuring, hey, it'll come back up again if it's that important. It's a bold technique. Prioritize work that aligns with the sprint goal, but it may not always, and that's okay. You can also consider stories that don't align, but that you know is important for your team. Okay. In our sprint review, we are always worried about running over our time box in the sprint review, especially during the demo part. So we listen and record live in front of the eyes of our people what's going on. Watch our demo video to learn more about that. But the result of that is that we have a list of actions that we call live actions. Well, guess what? They need to be turned into stories then. So harvest your live actions from the sprint review, and then your value delivery acceleration. Again, that's another video, VDA, value delivery acceleration. But basically, it's your relentless improvement stuff. They come from retrospectives or from one of the experiment libraries, like in my app, for example. So I have the app, a lot of experiments in there. You might grab one of those every sprint and try it out. Okay. But your team should always be trying to improve itself. And that's how we do it, the retrospectives or experiments from the library. And finally, also consider stories. Oh, look at that. That looks like it's the same thing. Yes. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Good. Okay. So that's how you allocate stories to the sprint. Now, as you go, you're going to want to update your initial story estimates. Why initial? In our teams, we use something called fast estimation. That's another video you can watch. Fast estimation ensures that every story has an estimate on it. So when we get to planning, now we get to kind of look at that and decide if we still really agree with that. Nothing is estimated by a single person. Everything is at least estimated by 2 people. but now that it's from planning time, the team is together. We validate that we're comfortable with the estimates that are there, talk it out. See our other videos on agile estimation and fast estimation if you want to learn more. Okay, next up is time to consider historical velocity. So everyone has an historical velocity after just a single sprint. Even if you've never had a velocity, load up your work with your gut and then add up the numbers, and there's your guess at your first velocity. But look at your historical velocity and then adjust it by capacity, vacations, holidays, et cetera. Now, a lot of people will go to the trouble of making an Excel spreadsheet where they put in everybody's hours and they put in if they're not going to be there, and then it auto calculates new velocities based on some historical velocity. We don't do that anymore. We did that when we were a very young agile team. Now it's just hey, is anybody out? No? Okay, let's just keep this. Oh yeah, Anthony, you're out. Do you think you're going to impact the velocity? It's like, nah, I've been kind of not, I don't think it'll impact it. You can go ahead and keep it at full. No, Anthony's doing half the work. Let's cut it by 50%, right? Just have a conversation of how different people being out affect the velocity that we want to target. Okay, so I don't go into the high mathematics anymore. Look at the people. Okay, now here's some other fun stuff. We look at the people with the highest load per person. So we all take ownership of some stories. Now, some teams don't like that. They like to leave the names off so you have better collective ownership. But we like to actually have an accountable person for every story. Doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. It just means that your job is to make sure that one doesn't get forgotten. And then we try to spread that around. That's our collective ownership. So if I have 12 points and everyone else has 3 or 6, Anthony, you look like you're overloaded. Do we want to spread that around, or do we want to back down our velocity? A lot of times we'll say, Anthony, if you can just pull one story out, what would it be? Why don't we put that one in the next sprint? And then if you have time, go ahead and pull it in, right? So those are some of the tricks we use. So we remove scope based on capacity, either the total sprint velocity or by person. And again, we avoid calculations. We just have a conversation. All right. So after this, now you have your stories loaded from all kinds of sources. It's time to read those stories and summarize that into a sprint goal if you didn't have one. If you already had a sprint goal, it's time to just double check, hey, is our sprint goal still right compared to what we picked? And sometimes you'll adjust that sprint goal here. So now that becomes our final actual sprint goal that we publish. And then immediately after sprint planning, we are going to create or update our acceptance criteria. So we believe in doing your acceptance criteria just in time. Yes, sometimes we'll do backlog refinement sessions, especially if you do like PI planning or quarterly planning, and you plan out a whole quarter worth of stories. Now, some people think that's not agile. Do check out our quarterly planning thing and you'll see why it is super agile and super cool. Well, we love it. And we're hardcore agilists ourselves, at least in our own minds. So here we just remind ourselves that every story should be done when, a user can, again, you can you can watch our video on story refinement and you'll get more details about this, but a user can, acceptance criteria, done when, and then we always capture a deployment location. Where will we put our final product for this story? That's a great way to assure that the story actually produces something. And then what level of test we need to make sure that we did this well. So those are all the pieces of a refined story for us. And once they're refined, we can pull them out of the new column and into the accepted to sprint column. So that's it. That's the agenda that we use. You're free to use our agenda or make up your own. Iteration planning. Just making sure you know what you're doing and seeing how you do at the end. Thank you. I hope you found this video useful. I'm Anthony Crane with Pocket Coach, and I will stop my recording now.